Daniel Mercer heard the first scream before he saw the blood. Under the dead blue light of a 24-hour pharmacy sign, 3 men were dragging a woman across wet asphalt toward a black van. And the biggest one had a knife pressed so hard to her throat, it looked like 1 more inch would open her. Then the woman looked straight at Daniel's truck, mouth shaking, and mouthed one word that hit harder than the scream. Help. If stories about broken people forced into impossible choices pull you in, subscribe, like the video, and stay with me to the end. Because this one doesn't just hurt, it leaves a mark. Daniel should have driven. That was the same thing. His 10-year-old daughter Ellie was asleep in the back seat with a pink backpack on her lap and 1 shoe missing. His right knee still ached in the cold from an old injury he never fully admitted was permanent. And men who carried knives beside unmarked vans at midnight were never small problems. But some instincts don't die just because life punishes you for keeping them. He threw the truck into park so hard Ellie stirred in the back. "Lock the doors," he said over his shoulder, already opening his own. "Dad?" she mumbled, half asleep. "Now." By the time the first thug turned, Daniel was already moving. He slammed the truck door into the man's face. Bone cracked. The knife flashed. Daniel caught the second man by the wrist, drove his forearm down, and heard steel hit pavement. The third one came low, fast, desperate. Not a drunk idiot, trained enough to hurt somebody. Daniel took a punch to the ribs, another across the jaw, then buried his fist into the man's throat. The woman crawled backward, choking, one side of her face swollen and bleeding. "Get in the truck!" Daniel shouted. She didn't move. The biggest thug spat blood, smiled through it, and said, "You don't know who she is." Daniel hit him anyway. The man staggered back, then laughed again like pain didn't matter. "She's dead already," he said. "She just doesn't know it." A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. Too far. The second thug lunged for the knife on the ground. Daniel reached it first, kicked it under the truck, and the thug swung wild. Daniel countered on instinct. 3 fast hits, brutal and clean. The kind of muscle memory that never really leaves a man, no matter how hard he tries to bury the life it came from. The woman finally got to her feet, dizzy, shaking, and stumbled toward the passenger side. Then the third thug grabbed her wrist and yanked her back so hard she screamed. Daniel saw red. He drove his shoulder into the man's chest. Both of them hit the pavement. Daniel felt old fire in his lungs, old rage in his arms. He pinned the man, fist raised, and stopped when he heard Ellie crying inside the truck. Just one sound. Tiny, terrified. Human. That sound saved a life, not the thug's. Daniel got up instead of finishing him, and that gave the 3 men exactly the second they needed. They jumped into the van and tore out of the lot, tires spitting water. The woman collapsed beside the curb, clutching her side. Daniel backed toward the truck, eyes on the street, chest heaving. "Ellie, it's okay," he said, though nothing about his voice sounded okay. "Stay inside." He turned back to the woman. Up close, she looked younger than he thought. Late 20s, maybe. Dark hair matted with rain and blood, 1 hoop earring missing, mascara smeared under furious eyes that had not stopped scanning exits even while she struggled to breathe. She was scared. But worse than scared, she was still calculating. "Ambulance is coming," Daniel said. "No ambulance," her voice cracked. "No police. You were nearly killed. They'll find me there." She tried to stand and nearly folded in half. Daniel caught her before her head hit the curb. For 1 second, her hand gripped his jacket like she knew him. Then her eyes rose to his face, really focused on him for the first time, and something cold moved through her expression. Not gratitude, recognition. But before she could say anything, the sirens got closer, and she passed out in his arms. At the ER, Ellie sat curled in a plastic chair in Daniel's oversized hoodie, staring at the dried blood on his knuckles. "Did you kill them?" she whispered. Daniel looked at his hands. "No." "You almost did." He wanted to lie. Instead, he sat beside her and lowered his voice. "Sometimes stopping someone hurts." Ellie looked at him a long time. Kids know when adults are leaving out the part that matters. "Are we in trouble?" Daniel swallowed. "Maybe." That was when the nurse approached, holding a clipboard. "The woman's awake," she said. "She says she'll only give a statement if Mr. Mercer is present." Daniel froze. He hadn't told her his name. He walked into the room already feeling something shift under his feet. The woman was sitting upright despite the bruising, a split lip, purple blooming across one cheekbone, IV in her arm, fury in her eyes. On the bedside tray sat his wallet. The paramedics must have used it for contact information when she came in with him. She stared at him like she'd been waiting years for this moment. "Daniel Mercer," she said quietly. He said nothing. Her laugh came out broken. "Of course." The nurse glanced between them. "Do you know each other?" The woman never took her eyes off Daniel. "No," she said, "but I know exactly who he is." Then, in front of the nurse, the doctor, and God, she pointed at him with a shaking finger and said the words that made the room go dead. "My sister died because of that man." Daniel forgot how to breathe. The nurse frowned. "Ma'am?" "Get out," the woman snapped. The doctor started to object, saw her face, and thought better of it. A second later, they were alone. Rain tapped the window behind her. Daniel's voice came out rough. "Who are you?" She laughed again, but this time it almost turned into a sob. "You don't remember me." "Should I?" "Lena Vale." The name hit like a door blown off its hinges. 7 years disappeared. Smoke, sirens, shouting, a warehouse swallowing fire. A girl outside screaming her sister's name until her throat bled. Rose Vale. Daniel sat down without meaning to. Lena watched him with raw hatred. "You remember now." He did. Too well. 7 years earlier, Rose Vale had died in the Blackburn warehouse fire after breaking into the building for a story nobody in the city ever got to read. Daniel had been one of the firefighters on scene. The one photographed walking out carrying a child while flames poured through a 4th-floor window where Rose had last been seen alive. That picture had lived online for months. Hero to some people, coward to others. To Lena, apparently, executioner. "I didn't know it was you," Daniel said. "No," she whispered. "You just knew it was my sister, and you left her there." His face went still. "I went back in." "You came back out." "There was an explosion." "There was always an excuse." He looked down at the floor. This conversation had lived inside him for 7 years. It just had never had a face this sharp. "You think I don't know what happened that night?" Lena said. "You think I didn't watch that footage until I was sick? You think I didn't hear every version? Roof collapse, flashover, no clear path. You all say the same thing. But my sister called me from inside that building. She was alive when you reached her. Daniel's head lifted. Lena's eyes filled, but it only made her look more dangerous. She said, "A firefighter found me." Then the line cut out. He shut his eyes. "She said your name," Lena whispered. "Daniel." For a second, the room was not a hospital room anymore. It was smoke so thick it moved like cloth. It was a woman pinned under twisted metal, face blackened with soot, coughing blood, and still trying to push a little unconscious boy into his arms. "Take him." He opened his eyes fast. Lena mistook the pain on his face for guilt and leaned forward. "So when you dragged me off that street tonight," her mouth trembled, "was that supposed to make you feel better?" Daniel stepped back like she'd struck him. "I didn't save you from me." "Don't say save." Her voice sharpened. "You don't get to use that word with my family." Then she turned her face away from him and said, "Get out." He did. In the hallway, he nearly walked past Ellie. She was standing barefoot, one shoe in hand, eyes huge. "How much did you hear?" he asked. Ellie stared at him. "Did someone die because of you?" The truth is cruel, because sometimes it can be answered more than one way. Daniel knelt in front of her. "Yes," he said. That was enough to make his daughter step back. Next morning, his garage got a brick through the front window. It landed on the concrete beside a toolbox and a family photo he kept near the register. Him, Ellie, and his late wife Mara at a county fair. All three laughing at something the camera didn't catch. Wrapped around the brick was a note. "Stay away from Lena Vale." No signature. No need. Daniel read it twice, then looked out through the shattered glass at the empty street. He hadn't called Lena. He hadn't told anyone he even knew her. Which meant the men from the pharmacy weren't just after her. They were watching him now, too. Ellie came into the garage in her school uniform and saw the glass. "Dad?" He folded the note into his pocket before she could see it. "Go wait in the truck." "Who did that?" "Someone stupid." She looked at him in a way children do when they're deciding whether they still believe your version of the world. Then she asked, "Is it because of the woman?" Daniel didn't answer. That was answer enough. Lena left the hospital against medical advice before noon. Daniel found her because she had dropped something in the pharmacy parking lot during the attack. A brass key on a cheap motel key ring labeled 314. He told himself he was only returning it because people with knives and vans tended to come back for unfinished business. He found her in room 314 of the Red Crest Motel on the edge of town. Door cracked open, chain on. When she saw him through the gap, her face hardened. "You followed me." "You dropped this." He held up the key. She didn't reach for it. "Leave it on the ground." He almost did. Then he saw the room behind her. Maps on the wall, newspaper clippings, photos, a laptop. Burned edges of old documents spread across the bed. And in the middle of it all, a picture of Rose. Young, smiling, alive. "This is what those men were after?" he asked. Lena's jaw tightened. "Why would you care?" "Because they firebombed my garage this morning." That changed her face. Only for a second. Then suspicion came back. "How do I know you're not with them?" Daniel actually laughed, tired and humorless. "If I were with them, your door would already be open." She stared at him, measuring. Finally, she unhooked the chain. The room smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Up close, the bruises on her face were worse than last night. He put the key on the table. "What is it for?" She crossed her arms. "None of your business." "Then why were 3 men willing to kill you for it?" Lena hesitated. He saw the moment she decided between hating him and needing something. She hated him more. But fear was gaining ground. "It opens a locker at Union Station," she said. "My sister rented it 2 days before she died." Daniel's pulse shifted. "I thought the police cleared all her property." "They did, officially." Lena reached behind a stack of folders and pulled out an old flip phone with a cracked screen. "I found this in a box of our mother's things last month. It was Rose's backup phone. There was one unsent draft message on it. No number, just 2 words. She turned the screen. Locker key. Daniel looked from the phone to the brass key. "So you went digging?" "I went finishing," she snapped, "because nobody else did." He glanced at the wall again. Councilman Adrian Shaw in one photo. A retired fire captain named Martin Holloway in another. Blackburn warehouse permits. Property transfers. Insurance documents. Lena noticed where he was looking. "She was investigating Shaw," she said. "The warehouse wasn't empty. It was a storage site for off-book shipments and cash. Rose found proof." "And you think Shaw had her killed?" "I know she died in his fire." Daniel went still at the word his. Lena saw it and pressed harder. "Funny, right? Everyone said the fire was tragic. Electrical fault. Old wiring. But the building had failed inspection 3 months earlier and still somehow got its permit renewed. Holloway signed the scene report. Shaw's office buried the rest." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Holloway retired 6 years ago." "Exactly 1 month after my sister died." That landed. Daniel had spent years not looking too closely at the wreckage of that night because surviving it had already cost enough. His marriage had barely recovered from the hours and guilt and drinking that followed. Then Mara died in a car accident on a rainy road 2 years later, and grief stacked on guilt until he stopped trying to separate them. Single fatherhood had saved him only because a little girl still needed breakfast. But now the past was standing in a motel room with bruises on her face and his name in her mouth like a curse. "Why attack you now?" he asked. "Because I stole something from Shaw's archives office yesterday." He stared. "You did what?" She opened a folder and pulled out a photocopy of a ledger page. Numbers, dates, initials. One line circled in red. RV, Rosevale. Daniel's stomach turned. "They paid someone 3 days before the fire," Lena said. "Cash withdrawal, no vendor code, initials match my sister. Either they bribed her, which I don't believe for a second, or they paid to make her a problem. Or to silence her." Lena looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you helping me?" The right answer was because if powerful men were hunting a woman in parking lots, his daughter was already too close. The honest answer was worse. "Because if there's even a chance I was lied to about that night," Daniel said softly, "I need to know." Lena's face didn't soften, but she moved a pile of papers off the second chair. It was the closest thing to trust either of them had. They went to Union Station after dark. The old locker room smelled like rust and piss and forgotten goodbyes. Half the fluorescent lights were dead.
Daniel kept Ellie at his sister Anna's house with strict instructions not to open the door for anyone, then hated himself for how many times he checked his phone anyway. Locker 226 opened with a metallic groan. Inside was a canvas camera bag, a voice recorder, and a sealed envelope with Lena's name on it. Her hands shook before she even touched it. Daniel stepped back. She opened the envelope slowly, like paper could bite. Inside was a letter in Rose's handwriting. "If you're reading this, something went wrong." Lena's breath caught. Daniel looked away, but she grabbed his wrist hard. "Read it," she said. He did. "If you're reading this, something went wrong. Lena, I'm sorry. If Adrian Shaw finds me before I get this out, listen to the recorder. Don't trust the fire report. Don't trust Holloway. And if Daniel Mercer is alive, tell him he was right." They locked the east stairwell. Daniel read that last line twice. His throat closed. Lena snatched the page back. "What does that mean?" He could barely hear her over the sound in his own head. East stairwell. The route he'd tried to use. The route Holloway had radioed was clear. "It means," Daniel said slowly, "someone trapped us." Lena stared at him, and for the first time since the hospital, her anger cracked enough to let confusion through. "Us?" He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "Your sister wasn't the only one inside." They played the voice recorder in the truck because suddenly nothing felt safe indoors. Rose's voice came in broken bursts beneath static and distant alarms.
"If this gets found, I'm on 4. Shaw's men are moving the crates. Holloway is here. Oh my God." Metal clanged. A man's voice, too distorted to make out. Then Rose again, breathless. "They know I'm here." The recording jumped. Smoke alarms screamed somewhere in the background. Then came a voice Daniel hadn't heard in 7 years and still recognized instantly. His own. "Fire department, call out." Lena turned to him so fast she nearly dropped the recorder. On the recording, Rose coughed violently. "Here, here." Then Daniel's recorded voice, closer now. "Don't move." Another crash. Fire roaring. Rose panicked. "The boy, please, he's not breathing." Daniel's face went white. Lena stopped breathing altogether. The recorder hissed, then rose again, weaker now, every word dragged over pain. "Take him. Daniel, take him first." Lena's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel didn't move. On the recorder, he said, "I'm coming back." Rose answered with a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. "You better." Then a blast tore through the audio so violently Ellie's little unicorn keychain hanging from the ignition trembled. The rest was static. Lena dropped the recorder into her lap like it had burned her. For a full 10 seconds, there was nothing in the truck except both of them trying not to come apart in front of the other. Finally, Lena whispered, "Why didn't I ever hear this?" Daniel kept staring through the windshield. "Because somebody made sure you didn't." She looked at him, horror rising over old certainty. "All these years." He swallowed hard. "Yeah." Her next words came out shattered. "I hated you." Daniel finally turned. "I know." She shook her head once, then again, like she could physically throw the truth off her skin.
My sister told you to save the boy. Yes. And you tried to go back. Yes. Then why? Her voice broke. Why didn't you ever tell me? The question hurt because he had asked himself the same one for years. Because by the time the funerals were over, the city had already decided what it needed me to be. His eyes were glassy now, but his voice stayed flat with practice. A hero in one photograph, a failure in every room that mattered. And then your interview aired. She flinched. She knew the one. 19 years old, black dress, shaking on local television, saying through tears that the firefighter who came out alive had left her sister behind. It had spread like gasoline. Daniel had seen it once. Only once. I was a kid, Lena whispered. You were grieving. That doesn't make it okay. No, Daniel said. It doesn't. A car engine growled somewhere behind them.
Daniel checked the rearview mirror. Black sedan, idling. The same kind that had been parked across from his garage. He didn't say a word, just started the truck. The sedan's headlights turned on. Lena, Daniel said, every muscle in his body waking up. Put your seatbelt on. The sedan lunged forward. What followed wasn't driving. It was survival with tires. Daniel ripped out of the station lot as the sedan clipped their back bumper. Lena braced one hand on the dash and clutched the recorder with the other like it was a child. Rain began again, slicking the streets silver. Another car pulled out ahead, boxing them in. 2 cars, Lena said, panic rising. I see them. You always sound calm right before something terrible happens? That's because something terrible is usually happening. She almost laughed. Almost. The lead car braked hard. Daniel yanked the wheel, jumped the curb, and tore through an empty church parking lot. Headlights bounced across a stone cross and rows of wet windows. The second sedan came after them. A shot cracked through the night. Lena screamed as the rear windshield exploded. Daniel ducked instinctively, keeping one hand on the wheel. Down! She dropped. Another shot. Ellie's booster seat took the glass. That nearly broke him. He roared through a red light and cut under the interstate where the road narrowed between concrete walls. For a second, only one sedan could follow. Good. Then not good. Because the one that did pull alongside, the passenger window rolled down. A man leaned out with a pistol. Lena's eyes went huge. Daniel! He slammed the brakes. The sedan overshot by inches. Daniel cranked the wheel and smashed the truck into its rear quarter panel. Metal screamed. The sedan fishtailed, spun, and slammed nose first into a support column. Airbags burst white. Daniel didn't wait to see if the driver got out. He drove until the city lights thinned and his hands started shaking too hard to hide it. They took shelter in a church basement offered by an old priest Daniel knew from his firefighting days, a man wise enough not to ask questions while blood was drying on people's clothes. Lena sat on a folding chair with Rose's letter in her lap. Daniel stood near the door, phone pressed to his ear. Anna picked up on the second ring. Ellie's asleep, she said immediately. What happened? Keep the lights off, Daniel said. Don't let anyone in. If anyone asks, Ellie isn't there. Silence. Then Anna's voice turned deadly serious. Dan, what happened? He looked across the room at Lena, who was watching him like she had finally begun to understand how much of his life she had never seen. I'll explain later. He hung up. Lena got to her feet. This is because of me. This is because powerful men get nervous when dead women leave evidence. No. Tears finally slipped down her face. Your daughter's involved because of me. Daniel's jaw tightened. He was too tired to offer comfort he didn't yet feel. She was involved the second those men saw my face, he said. Lena nodded like she deserved that. Maybe she did. Then, very quietly, she said, There's more. He looked up. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand and forced the words out. Before Rose died, we fought. Badly. She wanted me to leave town for school. I accused her of trying to get rid of me. Lena laughed through tears. I told her she loved her stories more than her family. Daniel said nothing. She called me from inside the warehouse, Lena whispered. I missed it. I let it go to voicemail because I was angry. That landed in the room like another death. When I called back, she was gone. Daniel watched Lena crumble in slow motion, 7 years delayed. I blamed you, she said, voice shredding. Because blaming you was easier than living with that. This time when Daniel answered, there was no steel left in it. I know. And maybe that was cruel. Maybe it was mercy. Sometimes they sound the same. By morning, Adrian Shaw's face was on every local station talking about violence in the city and the need for order. Lena muted the TV in disgust. Then Daniel saw the lower headline. Former firefighter linked to assault. Old Blackburn case resurfaces. His stomach dropped. A security camera still from the pharmacy parking lot showed him on top of one of the thugs, fist raised. No context, no knife, no van. A second clip played. Lena's old interview. Then her newer one from the hospital lobby before she checked out. Grainy cell phone video calling Daniel Mercer the man who let my sister die. Daniel looked away before it ended. Lena went pale. I didn't know they were filming. That's the point, he said. His phone buzzed. School. He answered before the first ring finished. The principal's voice was too careful. Mr. Mercer, Ellie isn't in class. Everything inside him turned to ice. What? We believed she was picked up early by a family member. Daniel was already moving. She was not. The drive to Anna's apartment felt longer than the 7 years before it. Police cars were already there. Anna was sobbing on the curb, face gray. I only went downstairs for laundry, she cried when she saw him. I told Ellie not to open the door. I told her. Daniel grabbed her shoulders. What happened? Anna held up a phone. One new message. We have your daughter. Bring the recorder and the locker contents to Blackburn Warehouse by 8 p.m. Come alone, or she burns like Rose. Lena read it over his shoulder and made a sound so small it barely counted as human. Daniel stepped away before he exploded. For the next hour, every cop in the room tried to talk procedure. He barely heard any of it. Then Detective Rourke arrived, middle-aged, calm eyes, expensive watch. Too smooth. Daniel recognized him a second too late. He was the same man who had leaned out of the sedan with the gun. Rourke saw recognition flicker and smiled without warmth. Mr. Mercer, he said, I strongly advise against acting emotional. That was all Daniel needed. He slammed Rourke into the wall so hard, framed family photos fell and shattered. Cops surged forward. Lena shouted, He's one of them! Rourke recovered fast, but not fast enough to hide the panic in his face. Everything blew open after that. The cops weren't all dirty, just enough of them. Enough to stall a search. Enough to leak locations. Enough to help men like Shaw sleep at night. By the time Internal Affairs was called, Daniel knew one thing with perfect clarity. If he waited for the system, Ellie would die inside it. At 7:40 p.m., he stood outside the black skeleton of Blackburn Warehouse with a duffel bag in one hand and Rose's recorder in his pocket. He had told Lena to stay away. She had promised nothing. The building loomed against the dark like a memory too angry to die. Charred beams still jutted from broken windows. The city had fenced part of it off years ago, then forgotten the rest. Daniel walked in through the same loading bay he had entered 7 years ago. The smell hit him first. Rain, rust, ash buried in concrete. Ghosts have sense if you've earned enough of them. A spotlight snapped on above him. Ellie sat tied to a metal chair on the second-floor platform, tape on her mouth, eyes wide and wet, but alive. "Dad!" The cry came muffled, but it tore through him. Adrian Shaw stepped into the light beside her in a wool coat too clean for the ruin around him. Martin Holloway emerged from the shadows on the other side, older now, heavier, but unmistakable. Daniel felt something inside himself go absolutely still. Holloway. His former captain. The man who had said the east stairwell was clear. The man who had grabbed Daniel's air tank and screamed, "Pull back," while Rose burned above them. "I wondered if you'd recognize me first," Holloway said. "Or blame him." He nodded at Shaw. Daniel's voice was low enough to scare angels. "Let her go." Shaw smiled. "You've always been sentimental." "Trade," Daniel said, lifting the duffel. Holloway laughed. "Still think there's a clean way out?" Then a voice echoed from the dark below. "No," Lena said. "He's just the only one here who still remembers what a conscience sounds like." Shaw's smile vanished. Daniel closed his eyes for one split second. Of course she came. Lena stepped into the open, holding her phone. "Smile for the city, Adrian." Shaw looked confused. Then Daniel noticed the tiny red light. Live. She was streaming. Every word, every face. Rourke lunged from behind a pillar, but Daniel moved first, slamming him into rebar so hard the gun flew from his hand. Holloway reached for Ellie. Lena screamed. Shaw cursed and drew a pistol. Everything happened at once. Daniel sprinted for the stairs. Holloway fired. Concrete burst beside Daniel's head. Ellie cried out, chair tipping. Lena rushed Shaw, and he backhanded her so hard she hit the floor. Rourke got up bloody and grabbed for the recorder hanging from Daniel's jacket pocket. Daniel drove his elbow backward, broke the man's nose, and kept climbing. Holloway met him halfway. Old captain, old betrayal, old fire. "You should have left it buried," Holloway snarled. "You locked that stairwell." Holloway's face twisted. "I followed orders." Daniel hit him. Not once. Not enough. Years came out in every punch. The report, the lies, the funeral. Ellie hearing at school that her father let women die. Mara's voice years ago begging him to stop drinking. His own face in mirrors he learned not to trust. Holloway swung a pipe. Daniel took it in the shoulder and nearly went down. Holloway raised it again. Then Rose's voice exploded through the warehouse speakers. Lena. She had connected the recorder to a portable amp. "If this gets found,"
Rose's voice echoed through the ruin, raw and alive and impossible. Daniel Mercer tried to get me out. He saved the boy because I told him to. If I die, it's Shaw. It's Holloway. They locked the stairwell. Don't let them bury me with their lies. Silence followed. Not real silence. The kind that arrives when truth finally enters a room full of cowards. Holloway's face drained. Down below, Shaw fired at the speaker in pure panic. The shot missed. Outside, sirens began to rise. Real ones. Not bought. Not delayed. Lena had done more than stream. She had sent the feed everywhere. Holloway snarled and charged again, but Daniel was no longer fighting a ghost. He ducked the pipe, drove forward, and sent the older man crashing through a rotten section of railing.
Holloway dropped to the floor below in a scream of splintered wood and pain. Daniel reached Ellie. His hands shook so badly he couldn't get the knots at first. "It's okay," he kept saying, though he was crying now and didn't know when it started. "I've got you. I've got you." Ellie launched herself into him the second her wrists were free and held on like gravity was trying to steal her. Below them, Shaw had Lena by the throat with the gun jammed under her jaw. "You stupid girl," he hissed. Lena's eyes found Daniel's, not begging, apologizing. Shaw dragged her backward toward the loading bay. Daniel had one arm around Ellie. He could chase. He could risk the stairs, the gun, the chaos. Or he could hold his daughter. Again, a choice. Again, a life in his arms. Ellie clung to him, trembling. "Dad, don't leave." Something in Daniel shattered and healed in the same breath. He crouched, took Ellie's face in both hands, and said, "I'm not leaving you. Ever." Then he looked past her. Lena was still fighting, still alive, still not her sister. "Cover your ears," he whispered to Ellie. He drew the flare gun from the emergency box bolted to the platform wall. Old building code, old luck, and fired. The flare slammed into a puddle of leaked solvent near Shaw's feet. Flame roared up, bright and violent. Shaw stumbled back in terror, losing grip on Lena just long enough for her to knee him hard and dive aside. Police flooded the bay doors seconds later. This time, they weren't late. This time, the city heard the truth before anyone could edit it. When it was over, Shaw was in cuffs. Rourke was bleeding against a wall, and Holloway was being carried out on a stretcher with one arm hanging at the wrong angle and every lie he had ever signed finally dead on arrival. Lena sat on the warehouse floor, wrapped in a blanket, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Daniel carried Ellie past her toward the ambulances. Then he stopped. Lena looked up. All the hatred was gone. What remained was worse. Grief stripped clean. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Daniel stood in the flashing red-blue light with his daughter asleep against his shoulder, soot on his face, blood on his sleeve, and 7 years of weight shifting where nobody could see. "For what part?" he asked softly. Lena broke completely. "For needing you to be guilty," she said. "Because if you weren't, then she was really gone." Daniel closed his eyes. When he opened them, he walked back to her. Not as a hero, not as a man who had won anything. Just as someone who understood that grief can turn love into a weapon if you don't put it down in time. He crouched and handed her Rose's letter. "She knew who killed her," he said. "But the last thing she said about you wasn't anger. Lena stared up at him, tears burning. What was it? Daniel remembered the part at the end of the letter, the line Lena had been too wrecked to finish reading in the station locker. He said it gently. She wrote, "Tell Lena, I never wanted her to become hard just because the world was." Lena covered her face and sobbed into both hands. Weeks later, the city held a new memorial at the site of Blackburn Warehouse. Not for tragedy, for truth. Rosevale's investigation was published in full. Adrian Shaw's empire unraveled in 4 counties. Holloway's report was thrown out. Daniel Mercer's name was cleared publicly, officially, finally. But the moment that mattered most wasn't on the news. It happened after the speeches, after the cameras drifted toward shinier stories. Ellie walked to the memorial wall, holding a white rose in one hand and Daniel's fingers in the other. Lena stood waiting there. No anger now. No performance. Just a woman carrying her sister's absence with both hands. Ellie placed the flower beneath Rose's photograph. Then she looked up at Lena and said, very seriously, "My dad came back for her." Lena's mouth trembled. "I know," she whispered. Daniel felt the wind move through the memorial ribbons overhead. For years he had lived like a man still trapped in smoke, taking small breaths, expecting collapse, believing survival and forgiveness were different countries. Maybe they were. But that morning, standing beside his daughter, beside the sister of the woman he could not save and the woman he had, Daniel understood something at last. Some fires don't end when the flames go out. They end when the truth finally survives them.